Thank you all for joining Jay and I. I always talk like the law side of things, and you know Jay is the sales side of things, right? So we're kind of tag teaming this today, but we wanted to dive deeper into the property sold with the right to request repairs form. And Jay was trying to bring up some points, but we were running out of time yesterday, so we wanted to dive into it a little bit deeper.
Actually, I already have a question too.
Okay.
I just didn't ask it because you didn't want to do one off.
Yes, that's what this is for. Absolutely.
Yes, that's why we're here.
Okay, so what's your question?
Well, you know, he said, using duct tape on the fan. Can't you actually put in there that it has to be done by a reputable?
You don't even have to put in there that it's done by a reputable. It is assumed that you're going to do it by a reputable. However, that was the extreme, Mike's duct tape scenario.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But we're at odds. So let me give you an example. A couple years ago, one of our agents, we were on the listing side. The seller hadn't lived in the home, was trying to sell it. The buyer wanted the chimney patched. There was some wood rot up there, some stuff done, patched and painted to match. You know what? They spent about $150, got a piece of wood, nailed it up there. It looked good, it looked all that, and then painted it, right? They didn't buy expensive paint. They didn't, I think they may have used interior paint on it. However,
No
at
caulking.
closing, it looked good. It rained. You could see streaks coming down from the rain. It's after closing. Buyer said it looked good. It's the buyer's problem now. Sue me. You sue me, what are they going to get? A judgment for what? $500?
$300, yeah.
That they're going to have to try and collect on.
So
It's one of those.
On the listing side of this, not on the buying side of this, right?
I'm talking about the repair side of anything.
Either side.
Either side.
Yeah.
Always get money compensation as opposed to repairs.
Gotcha.
Yes.
Always.
Because even if you represent the listing side, you want to encourage the seller to give a monetary contribution.
Okay.
Because if the buyer's not satisfied with it, you run into that problem. Okay, so I'll give you a completely different scenario. How you can control this on the buy side, and your buyer truly wants the seller to do the repairs, the buyer needs to have their contractor go out there and bid
Quote
it. And your amendment should specify this contractor, this bid number to be completed by the seller. Then that's how your buyer is controlling the process.
Got it.
Now, right now in today's market, that's going to take you 2-3 weeks to get done.
Yep.
And no seller's going to give you that long of a due diligence.
Due diligence.
Or they can put the money into an escrow with the closing attorney, and then they'll pay that contractor
When it's
once
done.
the work's done. And therefore,
If the lender, you got to check with the lender
The
when you
lender
start
can
getting
do
in
it.
all that stuff. If it's FHA, the lender won't allow it. You get into all kinds of stuff there.
Yeah.
But have the buyer choose the contractor that goes and bids the work, and then this is the stuff that we want done on the amendment.
because sometimes
that's
the
the
buyers
only
don't
way.
have the cash to do much of that stuff. And if they've already eaten up all their closing costs, they don't have a lot of cash.
Here's-
So if it's allowed, you can do the
So
escrow.
what David's saying is when there's cash, and I'm doing this because we're on the thing, the buyer doesn't have the cash to do it. That's a fallacy. If the buyer didn't have the cash to do the repairs post-closing, and they're getting a credit from the seller for the money, that's less money that they have to bring to closing. So if they have to bring $10,000 to close on this house, and they ask for a $5,000 seller contribution to closing costs, the seller's contributing $5,000. Now they only have to bring $5,000, so they still have that other $5,000 sitting over here to do the repairs. Okay, so always ask for money. It's the no-brainer way of making sure that there is no conflict when you're doing the repairs.
Isn't it true that a lot of attorneys don't want to do the post-closing escrow account, pay later?
Correct, they
things
do
like
not.
that?
Correct, they do not, most of them, so check with your attorney. As well, the lender doesn't allow it in a lot of cases.
The precondition to what we were talking about, though, which is that, always have the don't have the seller do it, have the buyer do it themselves. and get money instead. The precondition is that you got to go through the exercise of getting the inspection done. Nowhere in this, don't interpret this as saying you don't need to do an inspection, just ask for money. The basis for the amount of money that you're asking for is the inspection. And in theory, if you're doing this the right way and you've got enough time, not only would you have the inspection done, you would have a quote or a bid or something from a reputable contractor for all of that to be able to base your money off of. And when you present your amendment to address concerns to the seller, it is, here's our inspection report. Here are the 5 things that we want to have done or that are problematic, and we estimate those to be X dollars. And the amendment reads, seller to contribute X dollars to the buyer's closing cost or a reduction in the sales price.
So is there a limit on how much you can ask for?
Well, with seller paid closing costs, typically 3% because the lender will
Yeah.
only allow for a 3% contribution
So that's
for
all-
conventional and up to 6% for FHA.
So they can take the money off the asking price instead?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
That, taking the money off the asking price then falls into the problem that David was talking about, where the buyer doesn't have $5,000 extra cash above and beyond to make the repairs. So if you reduce the purchase price, they still don't have that money. It's this,
Why would they have that? Oh.
Because-
Taken off the purchase price, not off the actual money.
so basically they're financing the repairs for 30 years.
Yeah.
Over 30 years. And $5,000 over 30 years comes out to what, $2.50 a month? It's nothing in comparison.
Yeah.
All right, so moving on to this, the property sold with right to request repairs. The points that I was making in this is the buyer shall have the right to request that the seller repair and or replace defects. Jay's point to this is that is the benefit to the seller. That's how the seller sees the benefit in this, right? You want to speak to it quick?
Yeah, so the reason why you would use this instead of a due diligence period, okay? So a due diligence period, 5 days of due diligence, anytime during those 5 days, Dwayne,
I
you're,
don't like that house.
you're my buyer. Exactly. I've changed my mind, okay? So due diligence, the easiest way to explain it to a client is a due diligence period means I can cancel this contract and get my earnest money back for any reason at all or for no reason at all. Dwayne, I believe your house is haunted by Elvis's ghost. I'm going to terminate my contract, and I am perfectly within my right to do so with a due diligence period. All right? Now, if I put 0 under the due diligence period, which makes your offer more attractive to the seller, however, I include a property sold with a right to request repairs, now I'm basically saying I'm taking the no reason at all, the Elvis scenario, off the table, and the only reason that I can cancel this contract and still get my earnest money back is if we fail to come to an agreement in terms of the repairs done on the home. Okay, so you're not giving up too much. You're not asking your buyer to completely waive the due diligence period and accept the home as is, but you're also making your offer more attractive. So it's kind of the middle of the road.
I think it seems like the same thing, though.
It is absolutely not. So here's a prime example. Representing a buyer, the home is in an HOA. You want to have time to review the CC&Rs, right? If you don't have a due diligence period, they can review the CC&Rs. If they don't like what they have to say, they can't terminate for that reason. If they have this right to request repairs, they have to do an inspection, and you have to request that the seller make the repairs.
But they can have their inspection and say, okay, we want you to do these 20 things, what they know are going to do. They'll refuse it, and they get their earnest money and go back out. They can work around it, I guess.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
So it's not truly a no due diligence period, and we're buying the house as is. This is just another way of, okay, well, if you don't want it, just ask for 50 things. They won't do it, and then you can get out.
I mean, that could be a strategy.
You can't break it down to that level. Like if there is something like chip paint or something like that, or this room needs to be painted, or the carpet needs to be replaced, or anything like that. It has to be, when you get into definitions, it talks about the defects.
The defects, there's
Read through all the defects.
3 categories.
It is very specific in there.
A significant health risk, constitutes violation of current laws, codes, and is not in the present time in good working order or repair.
And isn't it also true that they disclose that on a seller's property disclosure? You can't claim that as a defect.
Correct.
And if you're a listing agent and someone presents this to you,
On the flip side, yeah,
I think the presenter last week, the attorney guy, said that the people that he's talked to on the listing side say they don't like this because then that means I have to disclose it. Well, that's no different than a due diligence period, and they present you the inspection. So
except if you're representing the seller and the buyer's agent comes back and says, hey, there's this big long list of stuff that's on this inspection report, we're gonna ask for you to reduce and you know the seller's not gonna budge, say, you know what, just terminate the contract. Just send me a termination. The seller's not willing to make any repairs. Avoid seeing that and you don't have to disclose. You don't have knowledge of the defects. Go ahead.
Can I share an experience I had?
Sure.
sure.
So I wrote a contract with zero due diligence, and I used this form.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I didn't understand that term defects, but I learned really quick.
Yes.
So this is what saved me.
Everyone learns really quick when they try and use this form and use it improperly. That's why we're doing this today.
$5,000 earnest money, and after I learned about the defects, we were already under contract, and I about had a heart attack because I didn't realize that I had put my client's $5,000 earnest money in jeopardy. But it turned out that they had disclosed, this property was built around the 1990s. So it had polybutylene, it had synthetic stucco, and it
And
also
probably
had
the drywall.
LP. It had a trifecta.
Yeah,
of
LP.
all these class action lawsuit issues. So they had only disclosed the PVP piping, which saved us, because the other things on this property were defects, using that term in this exhibit. So we were able to, negotiate. But I learned that zero due diligence does not mean that if anything comes up on that inspection report means that we can dispute it, make it.
It is a
money
very
back.
defined.
It does not mean that. It has to be a defect. And that was,
Yep.
like, that little piece right there
Yep.
was so significant that I read the thing 3 times before I turned the contract in, and it still didn't click until after, and I was like, oh my God. So
So again, another reason we say,
Read.
don't use this form. I mean, really, it is not necessarily that advantageous to you. It doesn't, from the seller's side, if the seller comes at you and says, hey, I want you to use the right to, the right to request repairs. Say, are you sure you want me to bring you a full inspection report that if we don't work this out, you have to disclose every little thing about the house on? It's just one way you can talk to the listing agent to try and get them to understand, I don't want to use this. Make sense? Filling out this form again, at the top though, these 2 dates, I have seen this multiple times, those
Yep.
dates are not correct. You see this says, if buyer timely submits the written amendment and accompanying inspection report, so within 7 days, they timely do that. Buyer and seller shall have, they say, 3 days to negotiate, because that's how it's written everywhere else in the contract, right? Our contracts are just written that way. You have 3 days from the time you do all that to do it. No, it's 3 days from the binding agreement date. So that is the biggest mistake that I've seen on this form, which means you don't have a negotiation period. You're
So if
past
we
it
put
already.
5 days up there to get it to them, 3 days down there, then they're 2 days past their time.
Yep.
Yep, to negotiate. You don't-
So you should do 5 and 8.
1 and 3, or whatever it is.
Second
7
two
and 10.
number should
Gotta be a bigger
always
number.
be higher.
7,
I would say
10.
give yourself 3 to 5 days to negotiate.
Yep.
So it has caused the loss of earnest.
Why it is different than just due diligence period is 7 days or 10 days or 5 days, and you have to do it all within that time. To me, it seems like it'd just structurally be easier to just do it the same way. But why Seth Weissman just decided to do it this way, I don't know. But just be aware of it. Don't get caught with your pants around your ankles with this.
Yep. That is definitely the point here, because it has happened. It has happened in this office. Thankfully, we were on the list side. On all of the occasions, we have been on the list side. So, but this is becoming more and more of a, we want this instead of a due diligence period, because you could terminate because your nose itches, you know? That's not practical. Most people don't do that.
Or Elvis's ghost is in your house. I like that one.
Elvis's ghost.
Elvis's ghost.
I like my nose itches. So.
Okay, well, it
But
works.
yeah, no, this isn't the right house for me. Because I believe in ghosts.
Any other questions?
If you do use this one, which again, doesn't sound like you should, but if you do, and you do you have to bring them a negotiable position, or can you just say, hey, because of what we found, we're terminating?
No, you don't have to bring them a negotiable position. That's a good point. So let's say that you want, there's a foundation issue and there's this, and you requested them, and the seller's saying, no, we're not gonna do that. You don't, or you don't even necessarily have to do the repairs. You can ask for a concession as well on this. There's nothing that says that you can't ask for, instead of you doing the repairs, I want them done by my contractor. We estimate that to be $6,000. So we want a $6,000 concession. And the seller doesn't agree to it. All that spelled out further down in here. Buyer, you know, if you don't execute an amendment reflecting the accepted offer or counter, if neither party timely accepts the party's last counter offer, the buyer does not elect to buy the property, this agreement shall terminate. So.
But you do have to quantify before terminating. You couldn't just say.
Yes, you will have to quantify.
Yeah.
So you'll need to get an actual contractor bid out there. Most likely, it's gonna take more of a.
So you can't just fit it
Define,
as a
yeah, you can't say,
Yeah.
oh, this is gonna cost me $20,000. But in the example here, LP siding, well, it's a $15,000 to $20,000 job. They're replacing the siding on the house, right? Because you're not gonna, I don't want vinyl siding. The seller, if you say the seller to replace the siding, and they go, okay, we're putting vinyl siding up. Nah, I want hardy plank. The cost difference there is about twice as much. So,
Yeah.
I mean, you start getting into all those little details, and there's a pretty good chance. If you do decide to use this form, though, please stop by and ask us about it. That's what we're here for. We're gonna encourage you not to, and but we got to do what our clients want at the end of the day. We got to do what's in their best interest.
And clients that have fallen on their face 4, 5, 6 times already will do anything to differentiate their offer from the pack. And when you're presenting an offer and all of them have a due diligence period, and you got one that has a 0 with a property sold to right to request repairs instead, it can be a differentiator. So are there risks associated with it? Of course. Can they be mitigated with a smart agent that knows what they're doing? Yes.
So let me say this. Using this form, and I'll kind of pose all of you a question. If you have a due diligence period versus this form, you're the listing agent and you're getting these offers from your seller, $300,000 house, right? They're putting 20% down. If you got an offer with $30,000 in earnest money and a 7-day due diligence period, or an offer with $3,000 earnest money and a right to request repairs, which one is stronger? Why is it stronger?
They've done everything and they're confident.
They have 7 days due diligence. They still have the due diligence period. It just feels stronger. It's not stronger. Like Mike said yesterday, you're not keeping the earnest money. Don't miss your deadlines. You're not going to lose the earnest money. Don't miss your finance deadline. Don't miss your due diligence deadline. Terminate before it expires. And the money's not lost. They were putting $60,000 down on the house now, so what's the difference of putting $30,000 or $3,000 when that really makes the seller feel like your offer is stronger? Even if somebody else offered $310,000 with $3,100 in earnest money, I'm saying, I'll put $30,000 where my mouth is. Just don't miss that deadline.
I have personal knowledge of an agent that wrote an offer for a $300,000 house, and the earnest money was $300,000.
Wow.
Yeah,
Due diligence.
with a due diligence period.
Let me inspect the house. I want to make sure it's good. Everything, the bones are good, but here, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I'm not going to miss a deadline, and I'm going to close on this house.
So why put
It also
due
gives,
diligence?
why? Because you still want to have the house inspected.
Yeah.
You still, you don't want to.
You say that, but a lot of times I'm talking to agents that are listing, they're saying that the offer they got right now is no contingencies.
No
Zero due diligence.
contingencies.
Zero due diligence. I'm showing a house
Yep.
tonight. What do you do to compete with that?
Wait for it to come back on the market.
No, you don't
I'm
wait
just
for it
curious.
to come back on the market. It all depends on the seller. So one option is option money on page 1. Offer $3,000 in option money and $27,000 in earnest money. It's saying, I'm giving you $3,000 for the option to inspect your home.
Well, that's not.
And always include a.
And that's
letter.
non-refundable.
Always include
They're
a
losing that
letter
money.
Pulling a heartstring.
That goes-
because
it
you never
goes
know
towards
when
the purchase
connection's
price.
gonna be made.
Okay.
There's a checkbox to say.
I've
Good
seen
point.
people leave $10,000, and I was just telling him, always do a letter
I'll
and
be
a
right up
video with your buyers, because you never know. I've seen sellers leave 10 grand on the table because they connected with some young couple that are teachers, and their teachers are like, we want them to have the house. And they left 10,000, so always have a letter and a video, double check, just to make sure.
Just do that.
Yep.
Buyers to the seller?
Buyers to the seller. So do
The
a-
quote unquote love letter.
I have a letter that has, you put pictures, it was written by some buyer or one of my sellers. I'm like, holy crap, that is awesome. So I just copy and paste that, replace the names in it, show my buyers, they're like, we love it. And then I'll do a quick video, send a YouTube, and then just pull out all the stops to make sure.
Yeah. It's just stuff to differentiate your offer that doesn't have to do with risking, going through this whole process.
Coming from,
How do you send those videos? How do you send the videos?
Upload it to YouTube and make it a non-public link.
Private
So
video.
only who you share the link to can see it. And then when you do your offer email, then I'll text it to the agent and also I'll put it, will you please make sure this link, and you put the link in there to the YouTube video, gets to the seller. So I'm texting it and I'm emailing it. And then you put it on there with all your offer and everything else that's included. And then I just tell my people, it's not public, nobody's gonna see it, only person that actually shares the link.
Good deal. Any other questions? Good deal. All right.